Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest edition of your favorite NFL podcast that has been going strong for 127 episodes and counting. It's time for another edition of the podcast that is so good with prognostication because one of our hot seat head coaches last week was indeed fired already. So look at that. This show, we call it like we see it, and we're pretty good at calling it what
we fired an NFC head coach every year.
Yeah. Indeed we have. It's one of the traditions on this program. Welcome to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, one and all. The Podfather is not here. He has other things to work on this week. I can't really make anything up because there's nothing he did that was suspension worthy. Back from his one episode suspension as I, the Iceman, intro us in per usual with my diatribes. The man who served his one episode suspension for setting the podcast record for most curse words on a single show. The games master, Justin. Justin, how we doing? You've gone through the HR training. You went through the little 20-minute video that we had you to watch, and you are back, and you are fully rehabilitated. And I'm glad to have you back.
Glad to be here, Jake.
It's absolutely fantastic. No, in all seriousness, Justin missed last week. But per show lore, because that's the best thing, show lore. It's like headcanons for like people who are fans of stuff. Like Harry Potter, that's like one of those popular things. It's like there's a bajillion different headcanons. And it's some are worse than others, to say the least. But the show lore / SAOC headcanon is that Justin was suspended for an episode, ladies and gentlemen. But he's back, and he is ready, and he has learned his lesson. No more 35-minute Jets conversations on the program, because that's probably what's going to set him off.
The NFL hasn't learned that lesson. We will.
Indeed. So, as you guys... So last week, guys, me and the Podfather were here, and we went over the head coach hot seat meter. And also, we said some coaches were safe, but TBD on them. I think for the most part, those coaches that were on that list are actually, they won, if I'm not mistaken, or it was a bye week for one of them last week. Whatever. But we had a list of coaches, and one of them is gone. We'll see how many more by the end of the season. But we moved past that. We've rated the coaches. In a future episode, probably for the next week or so, we're going to give our midseason, because once again, thanks NFL for moving to a 17-game schedule. Well, there's no proper midseason anymore. But we will go through our like midseason-esque awards for the important trophies in the NFL, MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, etc. It's going to be fun to go through that. There most definitely will be some similarities, but I think some of the awards, Coach of the Year, I think Defensive Player of the Year, we'll have some good conversations about next week, Justin. I think there are some awards where the award races are like very, very close in terms of like having 3-4 candidates that could win at a time. But before we get to that, we have trades to discuss, because it's been a little like sprinkled throughout the last month or so of shows, like our trade discussions heading into the trade deadline, what we thought teams could do, players that we believed could have been on the move. We talked about the trades that were made way before the deadline, of course, Adams, Cooper, Johnson now. And we have more trades to discuss here in a few moments' time. So we're going to be highlighting the trades that happened closest to the deadline, and maybe a little bit before that. We're just going to highlight some teams that maybe did a little bit something around the time as well. Before we get to that, you guys know how this show works. Fun, football, chaos. Let's have some fun. And of course, the fan favorite segment of the show has quickly skyrocketed to the podium of fan favorite segments in this show's history. Maybe it's P1. It might be. It is time for Name That Player. Thank you, audience. Justin, let's do this.
All right. So this 3-team Super Bowl champ played in the NFL for a number of years, racking up 5 first-team All-Pros and 9 Pro Bowls.
Ooh. That's quite a individual accolade accomplishment right there.
Oh, yeah.
So 3 teams, Super Bowl champ, 9 Pro Bowls, and 5 first-team All-Pros. Okay. Now the brain racks through. So 3. Guy was on 3 different teams and clearly had success with each team. Okay. No, he played for more than 3 teams.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, so no, this one, this player definitely did. I might say him just because if I'm not confident saying anyone else.
Yeah, Jared, let's hear it. You got no one else to talk to. You got to talk with the crew.
I got to talk with you in the audience, the people watching from home, the whole 2 of you. No. But No, okay, this is an interesting one to say the very least. All right, that's. I feel like hopefully the second hint will help me in terms of this. So again, this first hint for the people that watch this and will inevitably be upset with this, know that I understand this is completely wrong, ladies and gentlemen. But this is just to help me get to the next hint. But this is a decent guess because this player did make a did win a Super Bowl in his career. I think he won two. Could be wrong, but he definitely won at least one. I want to say it should be relatively close to the Pro Bowls and the All Pros on him. Maybe it's slightly off, but this is one of the most successful like individual players in NFL history in terms of that. But he played for more than 3 teams, which is how I know it's wrong. But this is again just to help me get to the next hint. Primetime Deion Sanders.
That is a very good guess, Jerk, and I think you're on the right track. But it is not Deion Sanders. And just for the audience playing at home, Rick apparently is tuning in and said Brad Johnson, which is also incorrect.
You win some, you lose some.
What'd you say?
But you win some, you lose some, eh? On the
Absolutely. But we'll move on. You guys are on the right track, at least Jurg is, with defensive players, because this is a defensive player. Led the league in interceptions 3 different times. Was an NFL 2000s All-Decade team, and is currently, I believe, a Hall of Famer.
He led the league in interceptions 3 times?
3 times.
So 3 teams. So I'll go back to the first one. So 3 teams. Super Bowl. 9 Pro Bowls, 5 All Pros. I will swap that. But no, 9 Pro Bowls, 5 All Pros. All decades in the 2000s, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And led the league in interceptions 3 times. Okay, so definitely defensive back, obviously. Not Ed Reed. He only played for 1 team. Wait, no, Ed Reed did play for a team at the end, for the Jets. God, I forgot about that. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
He was decent for like a couple games.
I like that a couple games.
Well, I don't think he played the whole season for them, right?
Did he? I thought he did.
I don't know.
Ed Reed, no. Troy Polamalu, I think only played for Pittsburgh. He retired early. 3 teams. Well, it's not Darrelle Revis. I don't think Darrelle Revis made 9 Pro Bowls.
He did play for 3 teams.
Did. Jets. Wait. So hold on. I'll keep that.
New England.
I'll just keep him as a name in the back of my head but I think the thing with Revis for me is maybe I don't know if he made. I know he was good. Like, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he was a 9-time Pro Bowler. I think he falls short
for that long, which is fair.
Yeah, or it's not like because this is one of those episodes we could do like in the summer when we have downtime. But it's like going through individual accolades for players. You kind of realize that like it's hard to have a lot of Pro Bowls for certain guys. Like there's a reason why sometimes 6-time Pro Bowlers and 3-time All Pros make the Hall of Fame because it's really freaking hard to get named to those teams, especially when you know there are some voters that are just going to vote for the same guy every single year, which is why voting in general, when it comes to the NFL awards, and maybe certain countries' election. Anyways, geez. Okay, hold on. Okay, 9-time Pro Bowler, interceptions, all decades. See, now I'm thinking of the all decades team in the 2000s. Okay, I have a name. I know he played for 2 teams. He won a Super Bowl. Did he lead the league in interceptions 3 times? I could believe once. He was a good player.
Okay.
I'll say him, but I don't think it's him. But I think he checks off a lot of the categories again, which is why maybe if I'm lucky, I could be right here, or at least I'm close. Charles Woodson.
Ooh, Charles Woodson is another really good guess. And I do think, again, you're on the right path. But no, it is not Charles Woodson. Rick's second guess, Champ Bailey, is also incorrect.
Oh, but that's a solid one as well, though.
Yes. So, actually, those 3 seasons leading the league in interception is tied for the most years ever leading and the league in interceptions. He's also got the most career interception yards. He had a total of 646 total tackles, 139 pass deflections. The dude was obviously a Hall of Famer. He went to the University of Miami on a scholarship and was also a national champion.
Oh, a national champion that went to the U. That went to the U. That went to the U.
While you're thinking, Rick's last guest was Ty Law, which is
I know it's not Ty Law because I know he didn't go to the U actually. I don't know. Was it?
surprised if he can go to the U that Rick got that wrong. Our college football expert here.
No. The only reason I know is because last year was the year Michigan won, and I remember I was walking past a coworker, like at their like desktop setup one day,
Mhm.
and like they had like a list of like good Michigan players, and Ty Law was on the list. So that's the only reason I could know that off the top of my head. Understand that every once in a while when I know something, it's only because I saw it at work per chance. That's the perks of working in sports media. Oh my god, you're saying they made the all 2000s team?
I did.
This is all 2000s. Led the league in interceptions that many times. See, I feel like me and Rick, between the two of us, have named almost everyone on the all 2000s team. Honestly,
Yeah.
in terms of defensive backs, because he named Ty Law. He also named Champ Bailey. I named Woodson. And I also, like, they weren't my official guesses, but Ed Reed and Palomalu, I also talked about the two of them. Wait. Hold on. Wait a minute. I already said the answer.
You did.
I didn't just submit him, though.
Nope, you did not submit him. You guessed someone else.
Okay, so he played for another team, and I clearly don't remember what the other team was. Is it E.D. Reed?
The Houston Texans.
Ed Reed. How do I remember he played for the Jets and not the Texans?
Because he finished with the Jets.
Okay.
But he was on the Texans, I believe, for like maybe he wasn't even like a full. I don't even know if he played a game for them, but technically he did. He was a member of the Houston Texans in 2013 before he ended up being on the Jets. He signed a 3-year deal worth $15 million, and then went through surgery. He did play. He made his debut on September 22nd. The season progressed. He saw his playing time reduced, and he lost his starting job to Shiloh Keogh against the Colts in Week 9.
As one does.
Yes. And then he was released and signed by the Jets in 2013.
Wow.
So he played a few games for the Jets. Played more of that season for the Texans than the Jets.
Well, yeah, that's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, gotta call it a career at that point.
Mm-hmm. I thought you were gonna get it on guess 2. You said Ed Reed, and I was like, man, that was quick. I didn't even get it this time. I was real. It was stingy with it.
It was the third team thing caught me because I like his Texans time just blanks for me. But I remember he's a freaking Jet.
Yeah.
It's now because like once you said the U, I'm like, okay, NFL decade 2000s, the U, and Reed was the only one. And when I thought about it more, I'm like, wait, okay, so it can only be him. And both, because Rick didn't. I don't think Rick got it either. Like it was between the two of us. Like we both forgot that there was a third.
He said his Bluetooth cut out in the middle of the last clue. Otherwise, he probably would have got it.
That's fair. Also get better Bluetooth, Rick. Anyway, get better connectivity. No, that was a good one. That was a good one, Justin. That was a
good. Good getting it.
Yeah,
I just went right past it. I was close.
I went past it, but I drove right back. Like, wait. Oh my god. Oh, that was good. See, this is why, ladies and gentlemen, this is the fun that has football It's chaotic. Every segment of the show has an element to all three. That's the beauty of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. It connects us through the episode one and also another fantastic game right there, Justin. Beautiful, beautiful stuff for that one. Can't wait for next week when the Podfather's back and we tackle that one together. And maybe some more. It's been a while. We're gonna slowly give the games love. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. But name that player. I mean, come on now. We literally have there have been enough players to play in this league where we can do name that player every week for the rest of time, basically. Just wait till we get to Seneca Wallace is going to be a name that player one of these days. That's going to be one where
maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Although it'll be funny because then that'll somehow be the one where Rick and I get it on guess 2, and he's going to be like, "Really? It took you 3 for Ed Reed, but 2 for Seneca Wallace." Knowing us, honestly, that's kind of par for the course if I'm being completely honest.
That would make sense.
Per show lore and canon, 100% makes sense. We had more fun breaking down random players back when the three of us worked together than we did even just talking about stars. Like we did that one time just going through kickers and putters. God, that was the best of times. I think COVID just ruined everything for us.
COVID ruined everything for a lot of people.
Yeah. All right. One thing COVID will hopefully never ruin because it's gone. Well, not gone, but not a global pandemic anymore. Is us moving on to the next segment of the show. Yeah, not my smoothest transition. Live with fit people. It's time for an NFL trade deadline recap. We've gone through a bunch of the trades, honestly. The biggest names that occurred because that happened way before the deadline. So we're not going to regurgitate those. But there were some deals that did happen here recently, and we're going to talk about them. Because it's kind of what we have to do when you do a podcast. You have to talk about topics. So we are going to talk about the recent trades and some impact of these deals. Some short-term, some maybe a little bit of long-term to it. And I say we start with the biggest name that was traded at the deadline, Justin, because it was by a team that, look, for all intents and purposes, has shocked everyone this year. I think all three of us, maybe Rick would have been the exception. I think for the most part, the three of us thought that Washington was only going to finish third in their division this year at most. Maybe Rick had them second, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong. I'd have to try to remind myself. Considering he's watching the show, we'll probably get a text here in a handful of moments on if he did or not. But essentially, Washington has shocked us. They lead the division at this moment.
Listen, both teams in that trade shocked us.
Yes.
Saints started out 2-0, and they had 15 straight offensive possessions with a score.
Yeah.
And they were the hottest team in football before losing 6 straight, was it?
Yep. So 2-7 Saints, 7-2 Commanders. And you know what that means? That means they're perfect trade dance partners. So the full trade breakdown for itself. Now, this is a 4-time Pro Bowl quarterback. So there's that. A 4-time Pro Bowl quarterback in Marshawn Lattimore has been one of the top corners in the league since he entered. Him and a 2025 fifth-round pick were sent to Washington in exchange for a 2025 third, a 2025 fourth, and a 2025 sixth. So all picks that'll impact this upcoming year's draft. And that 2025 third-round pick is going to impact a selection in our 3-round mock, by the way. Let's not forget that, ladies and gentlemen. Because that's always around the corner, it feels like, and that's always a mega show for us, to say the very least. But Justin, Marshawn Lattimore traded to Washington. Now, the most obvious angle to tackle this, joke intended, is the fact that the Washington Commanders, who are having such a good start to the season, more than any of us could have ever imagined, they acquired a caliber of player like this. That means that obviously they're doing pretty good. But Justin, I'm going to throw this to you first because, this, who would have thought? When we started this show, it was at the very end of the Dan Snyder tenure, but it was also him still being very much Dan Snyder, right? It was the just complete lack of caring about the fan experience at the stadium. It was the disrespectful. I can't even say laughable. The disrespectful ways they were trying to honor Sean Taylor and his memory and his legacy, and just overall, forcing things to happen for the team, et cetera, forcing staff hirings, roster changes. Of course, there's everything that happened behind the scenes as well. That those stories coming out of him just being a scumbag. But in a very short amount of time, the Commanders have become, Justin, respectable again. And while also being respectable, this year they're doing good. Adam Schefter, I believe it was Schefter that said this before the deadline, and I think just before this trade broke, was that he's heard from people around the league that there are players that want to go to Washington. the turnaround, Justin, for this organization. Like that to me, you could talk about Lattimore, but talk about the turnaround for this team, Justin, because this is you want to talk about accelerating something. The accelerating of the 180 for the Commanders is breathtaking.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Whenever you have a culture like that that attracts players, it's a major thing. It's why players want to play for the Chiefs. It's why players want to play for, teams like the Rams. Like, you have a culture that even when you're not what people think you're going to be, you're still a good team. You're still competitive. You're still fun to play for. And it's definitely something that's been missing in Washington for a very long time. There's also an air of fun about being on that team. I mean, they're young, but there's good veterans on there. It seems like they're building it the right way. And if things continue the way it is, they have a really young core there that could be good for a very long time.
Yeah, and it truly amazes me. The Dan Quinn hiring has paid off in spades way more than most would have thought. I was critical of the hiring at first. I started to soften to it as we got closer to the season. They're doing pretty good, eh? They are doing pretty good.
I mean, we always knew Dan Quinn was a good head coach. I mean, they were half a game away from winning a Super Bowl under Dan Quinn in Atlanta, and sure, there was some issues, and you could maybe go put that on coaching. A lot of blame went to the offensive coordinator, was Sarkisian at the time?
No, that was Shanahan.
Oh, it was Shanahan?
28-30.
And
yeah.
then, I mean, it doesn't help when your all-pro center breaks his femur in the middle of the game. He toughed it out and played, but that offensive line was not the same.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, he was a great coordinator in Dallas after the fact. He was a great coordinator before that in Seattle. Guys like him. He knows the game. He understands what to do and how to put his team in good position. And frankly, they were needing some real help in the secondary for that defensive-minded head coach. And along comes a all-pro young quarterback in Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, and this, you just look at it of this time last year, the Commanders, they trade away Montez Sweat. They trade away Chase Young. Obviously for a reason, guys that probably weren't long for there. I'm not saying that.
No, but you're right. It seemed like such a you're not going to keep either one of those guys.
Yeah.
You spent all these first round picks on these guys, and I understand the sunk cost fallacy where you have to, you have to move on when the time is right. It doesn't matter how much you spent on it, but it seemed like, Chase Young was, unfortunately derailed by injuries, and he really hasn't really done much in San Francisco as far as I could tell. Or is he now where is he now? Is he still in San Francisco?
No, he had signed with the Saints in the offseason. And I think And
Sweat's having a great year for Chicago.
Yes, but, and Chase Young is still in New Orleans.
Yeah, but they're still playing pretty well along that defensive line. There's really not a ton to complain about up front defensively for them. It was really an issue in the secondary, and they had tried drafting corners and bringing guys in, and they could not find guys in the cornerback position. And it's a long way away from when Dan Quinn was there, and that was during the Legion of Boom era, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So, can you imagine what that defense would be like with a secondary like that right now?
Oh my God, right? And you mentioned the defense there in Washington. It's this is not the first time they're looking to the outside of things to help that team, because if you look at right now who the sack leaders for the squad are, 2 free agency signings that are leading the team in sacks right now: Dante Fowler and Frankie Louvu. Right?
Dante Fowler was a good pick for them. He's had a tough run, but
no, two very good.
Now he has production. So.
Yeah, two good picks right there in terms of free agency acquisitions, and now you make a trade for a guy like a Marshawn Lattimore. Washington they're hitting on things right now, man. They're absolutely making this again, a different conversation I have another time, but it's there's a difference when you're making moves for the sake of moves. You're making moves because this should work out. But with these 3 guys in particular, because Marshawn Lattimore, like it just feels like it's going to work out for this team, right? These three guys, it's that thing where it's calculated and it's working out, and it's just like it's like when a team, like you look at you mentioned the Legion of Boom there, right? Like to me, the Legion of Boom was a perfect example of the combination of the scouting and development of the Seattle Seahawks, because between Thomas, Chancellor, Sherman, uh, and like the various quarterback twos that they had on that team, I think only one of them was a pick in the first 2 rounds. The other was late. The others were later round picks, and they were naturally talented, yes, but Seattle had to have done a good job helping them get better, helping them develop. Like, there's just something about hitting consistently on your picks, on your players, that it can help you succeed. And these aren't draft picks, as I say, this free agency picks, the right contracts. Once again, look at the difference between this and some of the Dan Snyder stuff, right? Remember, this was at the start of last decade, but remember that offseason where Dan Snyder was just paying up the wazoo for various different names, paid for Albert Hainsworth, right? Donovan McNabb was the Washington quarterback for a spell of time. Like, it would just spend money on guys, and some guys they'd go there and they'd be there for a little bit, and they maybe had a little bit of success, right? Like Pierre Garcon, he was a Washington football player for a bit. I mean, wasn't there when the team was called that, but he was like, yeah, he was decent in Washington, right? He was a respectable player, but didn't really get to maybe make the impact on what could have been because the team wasn't as good. You had Donovan McNabb, who I think was only there for a year. You had Albert Hainsworth, who was run out of town. Well, walked out of town, maybe. Not run, to say the least. Like, you had various guys there that just, like, bad contracts, bad decisions. And it goes even before then, right? Like, it's not just, like, one time. And that's why I say, like, to me, what's amazing is how quickly Washington has turned things around in a span of what? When was the sale finalized? Like, was it even a year ago that Snyder finalized selling the team, or was it maybe it was more than a year ago? It's like it really does blend together at this point. But within the last year and a half, this has completely changed for this team, and just all the credit in the world for the complete, like, top down 100-point restoration of this organization. Ownership more like you're not Dan Snyder, you're automatically more likable. Ownership more likable. Management smart, taking their time, trying to make good selections. Head coach, like, and this is no disrespect because Ron Rivera is a guy in his own right, but it probably was, like, you talk about, like, moving on at the right time in certain instances. It probably was time to move on from Ron Rivera, and you get Dan Quinn in there, who had his success, built himself back up to a point, and then these players, and dude, all this with the young franchise quarterback. Jaden Daniels has looked good this season, and talk about a perfect storm of things happening for a team. That's what's happening right now. It's going to be interesting, I think, in the long term to see what this does for Washington, because obviously, the last couple of years, really, we've had, like, various teams have, like, these unexpected bursts, and they make the postseason, and there's consistency. Like, we believe the Texans will be consistent for many years to come in the AFC. Are Washington going to go down that path where there's consistency, or is it going to be the one year flash in a pan like the Jaguars kind of are? Which, don't worry, we'll talk about them here in a moment. It's going to be interesting to see which path that Washington goes down. But no, it's good. It's really good. You got to give them all the credit in the world. All right. It was the NFC team. Let's talk about a team that did a little bit more on, got some defense added to the team, but they also did make an offensive move before. So this is a team that added both sides, added on both sides of the ball. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe, I could be wrong, I'm almost certain we had to have mentioned the Mike Williams trade here, Justin. So there's not too much to talk about else in terms of, like, I don't know, maybe if there's anything you haven't said about it, you can. Like, the Mike Williams trade was fine for the Steelers, right? Just adding an extra wide receiver to a team that's like, it's your quarterbacks are Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. So it's like, it's not necessarily a wrong thought to try to add more wide receivers there in case you could do something with them. But Preston Smith is the big thing. So the Steelers, when they made the trade for Mike Williams, as I tried to pull up what the deal was, but I think it was a 5th round pick, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, they traded a 5th round pick for him. For the Preston Smith deal, it was, see, his website is just so poorly, like, filtered. Here we go. It was a 7th round pick sent to the Green Bay Packers. And in a team that is already very talented on the defensive side, especially with pass rush, to say the very least, they add a guy in Preston Smith who is really successful. Like, it was Zadarius and Preston Smith for the last years of Aaron Rodgers' career there that were like the leaders of that defense in terms of getting to the quarterback and having production. Zadarius Smith a couple years back was sent away, and Preston Smith, I think Preston Smith was on Washington beforehand, if I'm not mistaken. So this all kind of connects. He was on Washington, found success as a pass rusher in a massive way in Green Bay, and now being traded here to Pittsburgh, where it's looking like it's going to be a nice, granted the Packers could still make the playoffs, so it's not that he's going to a playoff team or from a playoff team to a bad team or a non-playoff team to a playoff team. It's kind of relatively even, right? Like, he's still going on a team that could make a bit of a run in the postseason. Maybe the odds are higher, who knows? But Preston Smith to the Steelers, phenomenal trade. Like, this is a guy who has been expected to produce big on a team before as one of their marquee pass rushers. Now can hide away as the kind of understudy to an extent with Watt and Highsmith there. And maybe he's out there at the same time with them. Maybe he's there as a rotational in certain instances, right? You trade a 5th and a 7th round pick for 2 good players who have proven track records of success in this league. That's pretty good, Justin. It's pretty good.
Absolutely. I think they're both major depth signings. I mean, Mike Williams, I think, immediately becomes a top 3 receiver there. He's exactly the kind of receiver that Russell Wilson likes to throw to. I mean, he's a guy that can stretch the field. You can drop it in the bucket for him. Russell Wilson does throw one of the prettiest long balls that we've ever seen in the NFL. His long passes are excellent. He just has that arc. It lands right in the bucket, and these guys score touchdowns. That's what Mike Williams made his living on in as a Charger. So I think it's a great fit. I think it's going to be exactly what they want them to do. It's going to free up George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth a little bit. It might free up a guy like Calvin Austin, who's had a resurgence in his NFL career this year. And it's going to be the same thing for Preston Smith. I mean, can you imagine how much he was being targeted in Green Bay? And I know they have good pass rushers there, and Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary and stuff like that, but they also have really good pass rushers in Pittsburgh, and they're going to find a way to use Preston Smith in a way that, I guess only Mike Tomlin can. It's one of those things where maybe the rich get a little richer there. And look, we can sit here and we can make fun of Pittsburgh quarterbacks, but what's their record now? 6-2?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, they got a chance to beat Washington this week and be 7-2 and atop their division. We're not talking about the Bengals right now. We're not talking about the Ravens. We're never talking about the Browns. At least not in this situation.
Well, not good, to say the least.
We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, being atop their division.
It's a bit of a throwback, to say the very least.
Is it, though? I mean, they've been in all of these races for the last 12 years.
I would say the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't been really in it to the top. Like, the last 4 years, it's been the Ravens.
They've had winning records. All I'm saying is, even at their bottom, they have been
they're a wild card team.
At the very least. And guess what? When you make the playoffs, they're a team you don't want to play.
Man, Buffalo would agree with that. It was a pretty close game last year with Buffalo. It was a pretty close game.
They're not always going to win, but you'll feel that you played them the next week. You'll know.
All right. From one team that added, especially on the pass rush, we talked about Preston Smith. Let's talk about Zadarius Smith and where he went. Just look at all these connections going through these topics, ladies and gents. So we're masters at this. Maybe not. The Detroit Lions made their own addition at the deadline when it came to pass rush. Of course, with the injury of Aiden Hutchinson, which that mutant of a man is going to be attempting to come back in the postseason. Just, God, professional athletes are just next level psychopaths, but also committed, to say the very least. But the Detroit Lions also made their own addition to the pass rush, acquiring Zadarius Smith and a 7th round pick in 2026 in exchange for a 2025 5th and a 2026 6th. So 5, 6. Zadarius Smith, he's been on good playoff teams, Justin, of course. If I remember correctly, he broke out with Baltimore before he was sent to Green Bay. Fixture on Green Bay's defensive line for years. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit ever since, trying to find just a long-term home for himself at this point. And now he's landing in Detroit, and I don't know about long-term home, but at least for the rest of this year, he can help this team in terms of doing what he does best, get to the quarterback. And that's what this Lions team needs right now. Again, they've been fine relatively since Hutchinson, they lost him, but this is the kind of trade that we knew. We all earmarked this after Hutchinson went down. It was just a matter of who were they going to trade for. And they get a guy who he may not be as good as he was 2-3 years ago, necessarily, like in every way, because players get older, they regress at least slightly. But this is a guy that's Darius Smith, again, proven track record for a player that has shown up at his caliber before. It can really do good for you for the next couple weeks, to say the least, going into a stretch playoff run, which Detroit is obviously hoping to have and hoping to get the top seed for as they continue to try to charge through the NFC. So Zadarius Smith to Detroit. Justin, what do you make of it?
Well, they needed someone to come in there and replace Aiden Hutchinson, who, by the way, even after missing, 3 weeks, is still a top 5 in sacks this year. They really needed someone to get after the quarterback. And to do that, they needed a trade because he wasn't on the roster there. And I think it's important for them because it was something that they made a lot on last year. And this year, they're kind of middle of the pack in sacks. So they're hoping they can get a resurgence in the Zadarius Smith that we saw in Green Bay. I mean, obviously, he wasn't terrible in Cleveland, but he had some issues there. He had some injuries. They're hoping that they get a guy that can come in and give them double-digit sacks this year and really make an already really physical, good defensive team that much scarier.
Were you, and obviously it depends on the market, Justin, right? I don't think surprise is the word because they made the move we expected them to make. But did you think Detroit was going to make maybe another move? Because we're going to talk about some teams here in a moment that they made multiple moves for different positions. Did you think that Detroit maybe could have made another move in your opinion? Or do you think like it's fine for now? They just hit on what was most important, which is the pass rush.
I think that teams in a good position have to be wary of over trading. You know what I mean? There's a lot of chemistry in that room right now. And look, it's a risk bringing in a guy like Zadarius Smith. I mean, that's a big personality. I'm not saying that he's a bad guy. He's obviously very well loved in all the locker rooms he's ever been in. People are always talking very highly about him. But he's a big personality, and you have to make sure that that personality gels with the guys you have in the locker room already. I mean, that Lions team is so beloved right now because of the way that they gel on the field, off the field, in the media, everywhere. Everyone loves Dan Campbell and the way he's built up that franchise. And when you bring in a top guy, the chemistry changes, and it could be good. I'm not saying it's not going to be good, but it's a risk. And then it can easily become volatile when you make a ton of changes. Like, this is why you don't see these top teams making trade after trade after trade to become better. You make one, maybe two, you get veterans, and you get guys that aren't going to rock the boat in a bad way, if you understand what I mean. And that's why I think the Zadarius Smith trade was so good. It's because at the very least, he comes in and he brings that veteran presence to a younger team. They don't really have an older guy in that defensive line room.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're so young there. I mean, really, Hutchinson, in my mind, was the leader there, right? Yeah. So now they bring in a guy that can be that leader. And even if he doesn't have the production on the field, he can come in and say, all right, this is where we need to be. I'm going to be accounted for here. That'll free everyone else up.
Yeah. Yeah. And also you consider the environment there. And again, we talk about turnarounds for teams in a span of time. Dan Campbell and what he's done for Detroit, the culture of the coaches there, it's like Zadarius Smith, like you said, personality, last couple teams that he's been on, Cleveland, he was there for the last year and a half. He was on Minnesota for a season before that, right? If there's any coach in any locker room that I think he can very much get adjusted to and understanding his role, it would be a Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell feels like a guy that Zadarius Smith will vibe with as a coach. It 100% feels like that. And what you say is like something that I say similar things in a different way. Don't galaxy brain it, right? Like, don't galaxy brain the situation you have. Yes, when you look at the Detroit Lions, like, first off, running back, you don't have to worry about that for 2-3 years. Like, you never have to touch the running back room unless both somehow get hurt in the span of a season. Maybe then you consider a running back. But like running back, you're fine. Quarterback, Jared Goff is not looking as great this year as he was last year. He's had his moments. Still, he gets the job done. He gets the job done, and that's honestly what matters the most. Wide receivers maybe the only other position that I saw people like having the argument of like, oh, could they have done something there? But I look at wide receiver, you have your number one guy, right? In Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have a tight end too in Sam Laporta, where even though, trust me, as a Sam Laporta fantasy owner, nothing this season. Then again, that's almost every tight end. Like Sam Laporta is going to have his games, right? Like, don't worry. Jameson Williams and like the ups and downs of him in terms of playing and not being on the field, whether it hasn't been due to injury recently, it's due to him being an idiot off the field and just getting himself suspended for various things, whether it be betting or otherwise. Like, you're fine. You're fine. You don't need to swing too big on a trade for a skilled position player. You don't need to make that kind of risk. The offensive line is pretty good for all intents and purposes. And like I said, the defense, like, maybe secondary would have been the only other position I would have considered on this team. But again, if you're confident, and sometimes realistically, if your pass rush can do the job, it makes life easier for your secondary. Like, what have I said for years on this show? That the San Francisco 49ers, for years, the weakest part of that team has been the secondary. But because the pass rush is almost always so good, it hides your secondary. To me, if I'm building a defense, I'm building inside and then going out. I know people say the same thing on the offensively, build the offensive line. Like, let me pretend like I'm saying something, revelational here, even though I'm definitely not. But like, to me, if your front four and your front seven are getting the job done, life is easy for your back four guys, and with the coaching and the skill here, he went to Alabama. Is he talking about, does Darius Smith go to Alabama? Is that what Rick is referring to? Is he texted the show with through our live line, which is literally only him and only him. While Justin does that, overall, great great trade by Detroit. Don't think they had to do anything else. Like you said, Justin, don't overtrade. Me saying the same thing. Don't galaxy brain it, and they didn't do that. Didn't look. Lions are good, man. Lions.
He did not go to Alabama.
Yeah, who's he referring to? Jameson Williams. That's who he's referring to. I think because I mentioned Jameson Williams. Like, that has to be.
He's from Alabama. If that helps.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Darius Smith was born in Montgomery, Alabama.
There you go. Guilty by proxy, apparently, according to the Podfather. All right. I'm going to skip this topic briefly. I want to talk about this last because news about this team has also been brought up for other reasons, of course. Let's go to the bottom one first here. Chiefs, Ravens, and Vikings made some initial moves. We know the initial trades that all three of these squads made. The Chiefs traded for DeAndre Hopkins. The Baltimore Ravens traded for Deontay Johnson. And the Minnesota Vikings traded for Cam Akers. Now, various levels of skill there in terms of the skill position. But all three of these teams made subsequent moves to bolster the roster a little bit. The Chiefs were the earliest of these moves. I think he's already played a game for Kansas City, but Josh Uche was a trade that they made about a week and a half or so ago. With the Patriots, they sent the 6th round pick in next year's draft. Not next year of 2025, but the year after 2020. God, this terminology is good to confuse me. The 2026 draft pick was sent over for that. Uche, decent defensive player. Nothing crazy. But just more defense to another piece to it. You say rich get richer. That Kansas City Chiefs defense has been pretty good. I think a guy like a Josh Uche coming in for the Patriots team, he's played under multiple good head coaches in terms of the defensive side. It's a pretty good guy to have there. The Jacksonville Jaguars sent Cam Robinson to the Minnesota Vikings. Robinson in a conditional 7th round pick to the Vikings, and the Jaguars got a conditional 5th round pick that could become a 4th round pick. This is, of course, in order to fill the void of the Kristen Darisaw injury because he suffered a knee injury. Robinson is a free agent at the end of this year. So this is a simple rental for Minnesota, a smart rental for Minnesota, all things considered. So you got to give them credit there. And then the Baltimore Ravens, ironically, I mentioned this guy a couple weeks ago when we had that sham of an article from CBS Sports, and we're like, why don't you mention these guys? And we started to name our own names. And I said Tre'Davious White. And lo and behold, someone in the Ravens front office was listening to me because Tre'Davious White and a 7th round pick in 2027 to the Baltimore Ravens in exchange for a 2026 7th round pick. Tre'Davious White, real quick here. Tre'Davious White, former first rounder, of course, showed some promise with the Bills, but geez, Lord above, so many injuries to the kid. Played decent with the Rams. Nothing spectacular, but he wasn't bad either. And now goes to the Ravens. That team always needs depth, I think in the defensive backfield. For as talented as that defensive backfield is, Marlon Humphrey, Hamilton, they get dinged up here and there. Sometimes they miss a week or two. Sometimes, they might have to sit for portions of a quarter. Tre'Davious White, just good depth there. Not bad at all. I already said the intelligence of the Robinson move for the Vikings, pure rental. It's totally fine. You can afford that, especially when you're not giving up much. And Uche, good move. All in all, these three teams, Justin, you were just talking about it. Good teams make smart moves. I think these are all smart moves made by three pretty good teams this season.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we've already seen the DeAndre Hopkins trade pay off. That was something that they got him for. I don't understand how he keeps going for such low numbers, really. I mean, the Titans got him for what seemed like nothing and then traded him to the Chiefs for what seemed like nothing. Look at, I mean, even the Houston trade. Do you remember when the Houston traded him to Arizona and we were like, that's all they got?
Yeah, wasn't it for
It was
David
a second round
Johnson?
pick in David Johnson, who hadn't played in like 2 years.
Yeah, basically. It's like it was the end of David Johnson's career.
Yeah, and everyone was like, what? It was something. So that one was a head scratcher, but obviously it's going to work out, and the whole league is going to be real annoyed that once again this year the Chiefs got a real good receiver for what seems like pretty much nothing. The Baltimore Ravens. I love both trades. I mean, I think that they both address some major issues that the teams were having. They struggled early in the year with some rougher, I would say, losses, but look at they've obviously picked it up, and I do really like the trade that they made. And both trades, I'm sorry, that they made. And look, the Vikings are a really good team. They're one of these teams that I think that people didn't realize would be in the conversation this year. I mean, obviously, nobody really knew what Sam Darnold was going to end up being here, but this is a really good football team now, and they have a chance to take it to the next level. Why not go for it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's you kind of said the main crux of it. It's like good teams make smart moves, and these are all just smart moves. No imbalance to the team in any of these. These are all depth guys. The one that's not is obviously Robinson. Again, he's a rental. He's free to walk after the season. Like Darisaw is down for Minnesota. This is just a simple plug and play for a player who's played really well at tackle for his career. Has seen a little bit of playoff action, right? When the Jags made the playoffs a couple seasons ago. Pretty like again, we don't need to over explain it because like the actions of good teams speak for themselves, right? Really good teams don't make bad trades for the most part. Obviously, every once in a while they do, and then years later, SB Nation will make a collapse video for your team and how you collapse. Collapse series really good, by the way, by SB Nation. If you haven't seen that stuff, Justin, I don't know if it's ever appeared on your radar. Like the collapse series, the SB Nation. Now they put it on a separate YouTube channel, Secret Base. Okay, but the SB Nation collapse stuff. The way they just detail and timeline the whole thing, I'm very much a fan of those videos, to say the very least. Just to bring that up because I think it's pretty cool. Especially the hockey ones, of course. But yeah, all right. So we have a trade left. A little bit more to talk about for this team just in terms of the trade they made. Justin, with all the wide receivers that have been dealt in this deadline, Devontae Adams, big name, teams in the mix, traded to the Jets. Oh, okay. Amari Cooper, next, very good player, consistent player. Traded from the Browns to the Bills. Oh, okay. Baltimore, okay, we missed out on the top two guys. Let's bring in Deontay Johnson in. He's a solid player. He's going to understand his role in this team. It'll take a little bit. Boom. Decent trades all around for those various pieces, right? And you just said DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like, Devontae Adams, it made sense. A little bit was given up for. A little bit was given up in terms of the other trades. Justin. It was clearly obvious that you could get a pretty solid wide receiver, right? For a third, a fifth, right? So if we hit the middle of the road, if I say you got a 4th round pick to work with, Justin, what kind of wide receiver do you think you could get?
A decent young guy, no?
right? Or like maybe a veteran who's got some experience. Maybe he's got like some touchdowns this year. Maybe he's had success in the past. Is just a little bit slower this year, right? Like again, DeAndre Hopkins was traded for a fifth. Deontay Johnson didn't take a lot for him either, right? Like you get that caliber of player. Now, Justin, what if I told you? What if I told you you could get for a fourth round pick in this upcoming draft? I'll give you a young wide receiver. He's, I believe, below the age of 24, right? 23, 24. Now, here's the catch. He's only caught 12 passes this season, which is under 50% of his total targets, and he has 0 career touchdowns. What would you say to the team acquiring that kind of player?
It's not a great thing. I mean, look, all right, let me just clarify this. I don't understand why they would have traded a fourth for Mingo and not Thielen in theory. Because Thielen supposedly was on the block too, and I know he's hurt right now. And I know the Cowboys are probably going to end up pivoting towards maybe rebuilding at this point. They look like they're in dire need of a roster reset at the moment. So things are going to be different there in the coming years. But it might have been a little bit of an overpay, but I don't hate this trade. And let me tell you why. Mingo is still a young player. He's still a burner. And really, he's been on a bad team. And one of the biggest issues with this team has been quarterback play. And I understand that the stats aren't necessarily in his favor when he does get the ball thrown to him. But to take a chance on a guy who we know has the athletic ability to be in the NFL and has the speed, he's a burner in terms of all of these dudes who have world-class speed. And he's shown the ability to be a very good receiver in college. In my mind, they're literally just drafting Jonathan Mingo in the 4th round. You understand what I'm saying? They are building for the future there. Their receiving core is old. They really are only going to have CeeDee Lamb going forward. I mean, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, Brandon Cooks is on IR, but he's not really going to be there long term. He's good for them now. They're going to have some issues with running back. They have Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, who couldn't beat out Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook for some reason. They have a young tight end. Like, even if Dak is no longer there in the coming years, they're building something there. And while it was a pivot, and we might not have understood it at the time because we didn't necessarily know the extent of the Dak hamstring injury, this trade is not terrible. They're really just throwing a flyer on a guy who was argued to be one of the better receivers coming out of the draft in his year. Well, he was a 2nd-round pick originally.
Let me confirm that. I'll confirm that for you.
Yeah, and again, he's been known to have pretty good hands. I understand that his career has not panned out to what we thought it would be in Carolina, but let's be honest, no one's career in Carolina panned out to what we thought it would be. So I'm willing to maybe say, all right, I'm going to get a day 3 pick. I'm going to toss it aside to a team that's probably not going to do anything with it anyways at this rate.
Yeah.
Maybe we get some talent in. Yep. I mean, what are we working with here in Dallas? Really? They lost their deep threat when Cooks went down.
Yep.
CeeDee Lamb is still there, but they're going to have some issues at quarterback. I mean,
he's been a bit dinged up recently as well, hasn't he, Lamb? He's been a little bit dinged up.
I think he's always a little dinged up. Most of the top receivers are. I mean, they just get so much attention physically that they usually have like a questionable tag every week.
It's true.
With some sort of lower body injury. I mean, these guys take a lot of hits. So the more catches you take, the more hits you take. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
So look, I really don't. Everyone's burying them for this, but I really don't hate it. I really don't. I mean, the worst thing that happens is that you miss your 4th-round pick this year.
Which?
It's a day 3 pick.
Exactly.
If you really wanted to move up in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, all you have to do is package a 4th round and a 6th round from the next year.
Or 2/5 and a 6. Sometimes it's like
there's so many things
that
you could do to really move up in the 4th round if you needed to. They pretty much gave up nothing to take a flyer on what was a 2nd-round receiver 2 years ago.
Yes, he was the 2nd-round receiver. He was drafted 39th overall in the
He's
2023 draft.
Borderline 1st-round pick.
Yeah.
And he's been on a really, really bad team. And if you watch the tape, because I not that I watch a ton of Carolina Panthers tape, but Instagram is infamous in showing guys running wide open.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that you see in tape running wide open.
Yeah.
So let's see what he has on a better team with maybe a little bit of semblance of quarterback play. Cooper Rush is already an upgrade to what he's played with so far.
That's very true.
So, and the Cowboys' offensive line is better, and he will have better receivers around him. And realistically, I mean, I don't want to say they're better coached because I do like the coach down there in Carolina,
Dave Canales.
But I think that the Cowboys are a safer, stronger organization than Carolina, and this kid will have a much better chance to thrive in Dallas. This is a move that in 3 years, we might turn around and say, wow, this was a genius move.
And they only got him for a 4th.
And if it's not a genius move, people are going to turn around in 3 or 4 years and they'll be like, oh, we did trade for him? Oh, I didn't even remember. And that's it. There's not going to be a bad thing about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it does seem like they overpaid in this market, but I don't necessarily think that it was a bad trade.
And that was why I made it as the joke going into it of when you consider all of the names around it, trading a 4th-round pick for a player with 0 career touchdowns is like, what are you doing? But that's why we here on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, we look at things deeper than that.
You also have to take into consideration the other trades. There was more than just, the details. Amari Cooper was not owed a lot of money this year. He's a free agent next year, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And he was on a team that was not going to re-sign him because they were bad.
Yeah.
Devontae Adams.
There's money there that the Jets have had to rework, and
probably there was a lot of money. They had to rework his contract so that he's got void years next year.
Yep.
He was not part of the solution.
Yeah.
In Vegas,
definitely
he wasn't. DeAndre Hopkins was a free agent next year and had a lot of dead money hitting the Titans. It didn't make sense to keep these guys. It made sense for Carolina to keep a guy like Mingo.
Yeah.
Which is why Dallas had to pay more.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why we're ending the trade deadline aspect of it, because I think for the most part, we went over the trade itself. And Mingo, he's a former, like you said, 2nd-round pick. He's a 23-year-old going on 24. Like, he's going to catch his first career touchdown here soon enough. It'll be good for him. If anything, he's just more of a detriment to the fact.
Like I said, maybe it doesn't work out. But
who
cares for a 4th-round pick?
No, Justin, I'm not saying that to critique Dallas.
No, I didn't think you were. All I'm saying is,
I was trying to take a shot at the Panthers. Justin, don't rob me of taking a shot at David Tepper, man. Come on.
I'm sorry. I know what gives you joy in life.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. But no, like you said, it's like this is going to be a trade where there is literally zero risk in it for Dallas. Unless this 4th-round pick somehow becomes the next 5-time Pro Bowler. It's probably, and again, it's the Panthers using it. It's probably not going to happen. Like, it's fine.
What are the odds that the Cowboys were going to make that pick?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, here's the thing. This is why I think it's a mix of things. Every once in a while, a good GM is able to hit on their 4th and their 5th-round picks, and they can become good players for the team. Every once in a while. Not every single year. It's done. Look, the draft, especially 7 rounds of it in the NFL, which is 2nd longest technically compared to Major League Baseball, which the draft could go for 39 rounds. I think Justin and I were probably drafted for all we know in an MLB draft at that point.
The league also has such an extensive farm system. They have 3 leagues under them.
Yeah, only 3. It feels like 17. There's AAA, AA, single A, then there's single A, single A, like is something. Anyways, me making the joke of like, it's very difficult in this league to consistently draft. That's why it could go both ways. It's on one hand, if you have a GM and scouting group that can hit on 4th, 5th-round picks, that's awesome. But it's not an every single year thing. Let me use this guy as an example, and I know Justin's going to get a laugh at this, but this is why I'm using him. Look, I despise Trent Baalke and the fact that he still is employed because he's just a terrible general manager. I'm not critiquing Trent Baalke for in just the 2023 draft, he wasted a 4th and a 5th round pick and didn't do anything with it. It's the total body of work where he's GM'd 8 or 9 drafts and he's never been able to hit on a mid-round pick with any of his scouting groups. So a single 4th round pick traded for Dallas means nothing. They're probably going in 2027. Dallas is going to use their 4th round pick to get a defensive guy who will get 10 sacks for him in the season potentially. That's what, like, the 4th, 5th, even sometimes the 3rds, realistically, right? Like, you can give them up for a player that is a known commodity, technically. Like, that's, Justin, to your point especially, you're giving up, and you kind of mentioned it, I forget which one of the trades we already talked about. You're giving up the potential of this pick doing something for a definitive right now. Jonathan Mingo right now is automatically better than whatever that 4th round pick is right now. And the second he I'm saying right now, the second he catches a touchdown for Dallas, it'll just show David Tepper and co. like, hey, you used the 2nd round pick on a player, couldn't get him a single touchdown. Dallas automatically wins this trade if they just get a touchdown with Mingo, because it'll just be funny to laugh at the fact that the Carolina Panthers drafted a wide receiver in the 2nd round and couldn't throw him a freaking receiving touchdown.
Well, let me also just say, because of the quick turnover that they had, he was a last generation guy.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're being honest, he was. It's
GMs want to win with their guys.
True. Although the Carolina is different because their GM is the guy who was the assistant GM in the room when Mingo was drafted. So that's why. Like, I get it. He wasn't the guy that was there, but also. But here's what I say. It's like
he might have wanted someone else at that pick.
That's fair. That's fair. But like, to me,
he doesn't make the final decision.
That's true. But they do a lot of legwork. If we're being, like, assistant GMs, this is why
I'm sure he did a ton of scouting on Mingo. He was a Mingo guy, but
it's why one of those things where it's like, to me, it would be different if Carolina, if this was a guy that came from, like, let's say this was Cleveland's assistant general manager that went to Carolina, right? It totally makes sense. Like, I didn't draft this kid. Mm-hmm. What attachment do I have aside from he was on this team when I first took over? Like, so it's 50-50 there. Again, Carolina is a whole freaking mess in and of itself. Dallas, like, Carolina's loss is Dallas' gain here. Like, they're going to get a young, talented player who, I forget where he went. I'm sure he went in the 2nd or 3rd round when we did our 3-round mock here a couple years ago with Mingo in the draft. I think I may have been the ones to actually pick him if I remember. I'll see if I have the document for that draft.
Is Rick cooking right now?
Did he? Wait, let me read.
He just texted us. Picks are like recipe ingredients. Recipe ingredients. A known commodity is like a cake.
Hold on. You know what it is? I think that's still the joke between me and him about the whole cake thing. You don't remember that one, do you? No, okay, it's fine. But no, I think that's what Rick is referring to because he put cake in all capitals. I don't think Rick is baking anything right now. I think he said he was going to be out of the house most of the day, honestly. But that being said, so Justin, I want to focus in on, before we move on, I want to focus in on the point you brought up. Cowboys rebuild it coming. Dak was injured. He's put on IR with a hamstring thing. We know with the IR rules in the NFL now, you must sit a required 4 games. I think almost every of the major leagues now have had a specific amount of time that guys have to be on not eligible to play when they're put on IR to make it more legitimate. But Dak's on IR. I believe DeMarcus Lawrence was also put on IR. Which actually, hold on, let me pull it back up here, Justin, because I was just searching this in the background while you were talking. Dude, DeMarcus Lawrence. I just want to say this just for reference here. Justin, do you want to guess when the last season DeMarcus Lawrence had double-digit sacks was in his career?
3 years ago.
So 3 years ago would be 2021. Is that your guess?
Yes.
He had, in 7 games only, 3 sacks. The last time DeMarcus Lawrence had double-digit sacks was the 2018 NFL season.
Damn.
10.5 sacks. And he's never gotten anywhere near that ever since. Prescott, Lawrence, there's a reason why I'm bringing those guys up. You brought up the idea of them rebuilding, Justin. Is it, and God, when was the last time we'd say the Dallas Cowboys are going to go through a rebuild? Is the Cowboys rebuild coming? Is Dak not long for Dallas? DeMarcus Lawrence is, because I think DeMarcus Lawrence is a free agent after this year, if I'm not mistaken, because he's got his contract reworked for 3 years before 2022 season. This would be the 3rd year. Now, of course, with the advent of void years, it makes it a little bit complicated, but I believe DeMarcus Lawrence is a free agent after this year. So Lawrence is a free agent. Dak and all that it is when it comes to him, I don't know, man. It's are we going to see a rebuild / retool? Because you were bringing it up before, like the running back room is just like, what is this running back room at this point? It's various Cowboy selections and old man Zeke Elliott, which feels weird to say, but it's just the fact Zeke Elliott's just not at his peak anymore. It's an offensive line that is good. It's not as good as it was when I was obviously at the peak of their powers, but it's still pretty good. They're trying to fix it up a little bit here more, but it's still fine. And it's a defense that, like, there's some talented defensive players. And, of course, obviously, Michael Parsons is the main one. You have two very good defensive backs when they're healthy, but when they're healthy, right? Because I believe, was it Bland this season that has been hurt? Essentially the entire time? Like, didn't he suffer a season-ending injury, if I'm not mistaken? Or at least that's a months-long injury?
I think so. I think you're right.
So it's like, if you're Dallas, why not at this point with the fact that this team is it's going to take a massive second half run for them to make the postseason. And with Dak and his freaking 4-year extension that he got from this team, completely new money on the books. What do you do? Maybe rebuild's not the term here, Justin. Maybe retool is what Dallas has to do here in the short term, because it's not looking like a great team this year.
In the short term?
Yeah, like a year and a half, we'll say. Next year and a half.
There's nothing they could do this season, I think. I think that Dak is out for IR is at least 4 games, right?
Yeah.
So, and now the next 4 games, they play Philly, Houston, Washington, and the Giants. They go 0-4, the season's over. It's just a fact. They'll be 3-8, right? No, they'll be 3-9.
Yep.
They won't be able to have a winning record anymore. Realistically, they're not going to beat Cincinnati when he gets back. I mean, there's no point in bringing him back in December if you're going to lose to the Giants and the Commanders and Washington.
Yeah.
Like, people want to sit here and say that the Giants are a pushover team, but the Giants almost beat them the first time. They were, I think, a neighbor's drop away from winning. Yeah. That defense is for real, and without Dak, I mean, you never know. I guess with Cooper Rush, sometimes it's a big boost for them. He wins a lot of games when he comes in. I don't know why. He's a decent quarterback. It just happens. But they are probably not going to be the Giants in that situation on a Thursday night for Thanksgiving, I believe. I believe it's a Thanksgiving game. But yeah, so look, it's a long week after that. But if Dak is not ready yet, I'm not bringing him back for Cincinnati either. You know what I mean? And then they're in Carolina, home against Tampa Bay, who's probably going to need the game. And then they have 2 divisional games that are very important, but realistically, probably not for them. So at this point, I might sit here and say I paid this quarterback how much money? We're going to let him sit as long as possible this year. We are going to see how the next 4 games play out. But if we go 1-3, we're not putting Dak Prescott back in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then, because odds are you're not running the table to end the season and then going 9-8 and just making the playoffs. And then even if you do, you're going to be what? The 7th seed? Week 1, you're going to play Detroit. Would it be? Are they the number 2 seed right now? I don't know, but it's not worth all of this risk. So realistically, I think they're going to go into a rebuild mode. I think that they're probably going to have a high draft pick, and they might just straight up go offensive line. That offensive line needs some retooling. It's interesting because I want to sit here and say that their running backs are bad too, but how do you know with an offensive line that's struggling? And it's not the worst offensive line in the league, but it's not Dallas. It's not the way that we knew this team to be. Yeah. So we have to get back to basics. We have to get back to what made this team successful, and that is we're going to rebuild the offensive line. We're going to rebuild that defense. We're going to get some linebackers in there. When was the last time you saw a Cowboys team that didn't have linebackers?
A long time. It's just one of those things that's just unfortunate when you think
Mike is still there and he's hurt, but yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jared.
No. To your point of the linebackers, like, you just really think about this team and the bad luck they've had over the last, like, however many years with linebackers. Like, Leighton Vander Esch, so much success early in his career, retires early. Who's the kid out of Notre Dame that they got years back that was there for a good while? Jalen Smith, I think.
I don't know. I mean, even Sean Lee, who was like a fantastic linebacker for them for a long time, couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, it's like
No?
it's kind of snake bitten when you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, they always have one, and they can't seem to stay on the field. So they need to fix a lot of the things that's going on there. And then hopefully that will address some of the issues that they have with their uh, all or nothing kind of defense. Because realistically, it's either a turnover or a touchdown
Yeah,
lately. And then once that's fixed, the only issue is, can Dak lead them to the Super Bowl? And that's honestly, I still think he's a pretty good quarterback. And he might not be able to win when it counts, but it's hard to get a quarterback that's played the way that Dak Prescott has played in the NFL.
right.
He is consistently among the top of the league in his numbers. Sometimes he's got some issues with turnovers, but he's a great passer. He gets the ball in the end zone. They score a ton of points when he's at the helm, and it makes sense that they signed him for a long-term contract. They have to fix the rest of the team. It's just a fact. So we'll see how they do that. They are in a great position in terms of a rebuild because their core players are locked up.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, you really think about it. It's CD, Micah Parsons. Did they sign Micah?
I don't know if they did.
Well, it's CD and Dak, and Micah Parsons is young. Who, if they haven't signed him, they probably will soon.
Yeah, especially if they're going to clear up some of this roster. Like
they're going to have to clear up a ton of cap. Guys like Brandon Cooks, who were excellent in Dallas, will be moving on. And they're going to have to acknowledge the fact that they need to rebuild.
Yeah, so Micah hasn't signed yet. They did exercise his 5th-year option. So,
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's what they'll need. And yes, CD did sign. It was his 4-year, $136 million extension, $100 million guaranteed.
I know CD and Dak signed in the offseason.
Yes. So, it'll be interesting conversations to have with Dallas. And then it brings back up the question of Mike McCarthy and his coaching future and all that various things. And we'll see what all that entails for all intents and purposes. But there's the trade deadline acquisition discussions, Justin, and then some Cowboys talk there at the end. Look at that. Look at that. All right. So, I think the people are waiting. Because while I mentioned that the Name That Player is a favorite, of course, we know who's been a long-time favorite on the show is the hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge. It's time. It's time. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Of course, with the Podfather not being here, we made our picks beforehand. So we're going to run through what our selections are. And I think we could talk a little bit about like some of these teams and some of these various games here, Justin, especially because like one of us picked the Thursday night game. So we can discuss that barn burner of a contest here really quick. Just any other notes that we have for this upcoming slate of games, to say the very least. So the hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge, of course, as the beautiful people know, Rick, Justin, and I go through the landscape of the NFL games for a given week, and we pick games on a 4-to-1 basis scale. 4 with the most confidence that we have, of course, because it's the most amount of points. 1 being the least confident. Each of us must always make at least one upset pick. The upset pick must be used with our 2-point pick. We can pick a tie if we choose to. It must be used with our 4-point pick, which does get upgraded to a 5-point pick. And of course, the idea of who's favored in a game, how much are they favored by, et cetera, are given to us by our friends at
ESPN Bet.
Thank you. And I think I've said everything basically. Yeah, we all must pick at least an upset too. And of course, the leftover games are given to our mascot for the given season, for each given week. So, that being said, I think I hit all the notes there. Shall we run through these? Justin made several nights ago. I believe it was Wednesday night when we did these selections.
Yes.
And here's how everything shaped up. So, the picks of the week. Myself leading in the points of the season. I forget. I think we're separated by 3 or 4 points, if I'm not mistaken, in the standings. My selections this week were at my 4, I picked Minnesota. My 3-pointer, I picked San Francisco. With my 2, Cincinnati. Oh, so close. And with my 1, the Chargers. Justin's picks were Buffalo with his 4, the Philadelphia Eagles with his 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers with his 2-pointer. We've made mention of that game several times. They're facing Washington this upcoming weekend. The Chicago Bears with his 1. And Rick made his selections. He picked the Falcons with his 4, the Chiefs with his 3, the Dolphins with his 2. Still an upset pick. That was my desired upset pick before he took that. And the Giants with his 1. And the Gopher with a 5 times bonus this week because he only has 2. He doesn't get the 5x plus 1, just the 5x. Houston and Arizona
6
were his selections. So, quiet. Anyways, solid slate of games there. Just let's talk about the Thursday night game now. Unfortunately, it ends up in a loss for me in terms of what my selection was, but quite the quite the game there, Justin, that we had on Thursday night. I feel like we've had like some games here on Thursday Night Football recently where it's like last week's game was the Jets Texans game where the Jets end up getting the win, right? You had the big Garrett Wilson game. Devontae Adams got a touchdown in that one as well. Pretty good performances. The Rams upset the Vikings the week before that, 30-20 there. And the Niners Seahawks game in week 6. And of course, like I still think it's the best Thursday night game. So it's between this Thursday night game between Ravens Bengals and then the week 5 Thursday nighter, because that was the Falcons Bucks game that went to OT, right? So I've actually had some decent Thursday night games this season, to say the very least. So, good job on that, NFL. Still Thursday night, making these guys play on such short term. But let's break this down. The Bengals-Ravens game, the Bengals at one point were up 21-7 in the third quarter on a 67-yard bomb to Jamar Chase. They were up. The Ravens make a big run. Defensive stops by them. Offense could just start to get on a roll. They go up 28-21. The Bengals tie it on another 70-yarder from Burrow to Chase. Rashad Bateman and Lamar link up with just under 2 minutes to go to take back the lead. And then Jamar Chase, 3 touchdowns in this one, gets the touchdown in the final seconds of the contest. Let me just go to Jamar Chase real quick. 11 catches, Justin, 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. And worth noting, because earlier in the season when they faced the Ravens the first time, it lost to them in overtime, by the way. Remember, 41-38 was that game. He had in that game 10 catches, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think it's the most amount of yards that a player has had against an opponent in a season in God knows how long. I think I saw some kind of stat regarding that. Like just Jamar Chase just absolutely torching. And because of this game, as of now, Jamar Chase is actually first in all of the receiver categories. He's first in catches, first in yards, and first in touchdowns.
I will say he's at least 1 game ahead of everyone.
That is true. That is fair. That is all fairness. But
it is 2 games ahead of Justin Jefferson.
Yes.
They already had their bye.
Right. So there's that. All right. But of course, it's 34-35. And the Bengals go for 2, and they don't get it.
That was a rough pass by Burrow. I was surprised about that. I mean, look, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to Tanner Hudson to begin with. I like Tanner Hudson. I'm a Tanner Hudson guy. He was on my fantasy team for a while.
There you go.
Had him. But with all the weapons that you have there, I'm not sure Tanner Hudson is the target that I'm going for with the game on the line like that. And now the Bengals are in a rough shape.
Yeah, to say the very least. I know people were sharing screenshots after it because apparently, was it the 2-pointer? What was it everyone's saying? They're saying the refs missed a call on the 2-pointer.
Yeah, Burrow got slammed
right
after the fact.
Would it have been? I was going to say, was it
passer? It would have been
roughing the passer. Okay. No, I was forgetting if it was after the play or if it was during the play. If maybe that
it was after. It was like noticeably after.
Yes. Okay. I just want to be sure. But yes, no, you mentioned it. The Bengals now fall to 4-6 on the season. They are 2-4 in conference, 1-2 in the division. Both of those losses have come at the hands of the Baltimore Ravens now, and 2 high-scoring affairs, man. But also noteworthy, just for the sake of it, this was an away game, but the Bengals are 1-4 at home, just for context. So that's rough stuff to say the very least. They are 4-6 in the division. They are 3rd in the North. And if I just look at the playoff picture real quick, they are. I mean, they're still well in the hunt of things because right now the 7th seed is the Denver Broncos at 5-4. The Colts are 4-5. So those 2 teams, of course, are playing this upcoming week. The Bengals are 4-6. They're 9th. Right behind them are the 3-6 Jets, who have a game this week. Again, Justin, you know the Jets schedule, of course, better than me. Who are the Jets facing this week?
The Jets are actually, they have an easier schedule. They have the Cardinals, and then they have the Colts, and then they have the Seahawks. And then
this week the Colts play the Bills and the Broncos play Kansas City. So there's that. So I was asking just for the general context of like that's what the situation here is for Cincy. Man, the Cincinnati Bengals defense this season, Justin, because you look at the Bengals right now, their point differential as a whole, if I switch my view of this real quick just to get a much better look at it, points differential for the Cincinnati Bengals, they are a +8. 262 points allowed, though. That is and again, I know there's an extra game played, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy. We need to wait. But as of now, that is the most in the AFC at this moment in time. Will this probably change because the Raiders and the Jaguars both have to catch up in numbers of games and they're both at 2-7? Probably. But even if the Jags and the Raiders do allow this to go, Justin, we're talking about the Bengals being the third worst defense in terms of points allowed in the conference, right? It's not great. You look at you mentioned the Jets schedule going forward. Before I mentioned the Bengals schedule going forward, I just look at some of the losses that they've had this season. 37 points allowed to the Philadelphia Eagles. The 41-38 game that I mentioned earlier, right, with Baltimore. Even before that, 38-33 Commanders. It just this defense has really let up a lot of points and yardage this season, and it's gotten to a point where it's like Burrow and them can score. Now, clearly, like if it's not clear enough, get Jamar Chase the ball. Now, am I saying this because I have him on my fantasy team and he has helped me build up a massive lead in fantasy so far? Yes, absolutely. But also, just logically speaking, get your best player the ball when you get to him. But you were talking about the Jets schedule there. Cincy, they're scheduled for the rest of the season at LA. First game. Then I believe they have a bye coming up because the Bengals, their next game is Sunday the 17th, and then they don't play until December 1st. So there's their bye week in there for Thanksgiving. But they are in Los Angeles to face the Chargers. Then they're at home to face Pittsburgh. Then they're at Dallas. You mentioned that game earlier, Monday Night Football on the 9th. And to finish the season at Tennessee and 2 straight games at home against Cleveland and Denver, and then at Pittsburgh in the final week of the season. Their wild card odds could very well be on the line in that game in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh could be playing for something there, right? Because they're 6-2 right now. They're technically at the top of the division. They have the higher win percentage at this point, right? 750. They have one less win, but they have one less loss than the Baltimore Ravens. So it's kind of a put up or shut up, right? When it comes to the Pittsburgh, Steelers to an extent, but no, the Cincinnati Bengals in their season, they just need to get it together because this is Joe Burrow's playing the full season this year, right? We assume there's not an excuse if you're Zach Taylor, who was on the hot seat a week ago for us. Like, no excuse. You can't miss the postseason 2 years in a row with a talent like Joe Burrow. You just can't. That's inexcusable, to say the least. So that was my pick that played out. Let's looking at the rest of our picks, Justin. Your picks: Buffalo, Philly, Pittsburgh, Chicago. Pretty solid there. In terms of just focus on your top 2 picks there, Buffalo and Philly. You look at those 2 teams. Buffalo, I kind of mentioned it with Rick on last week's episode. Buffalo has a chance here. If they do extremely well the next 3 weeks and the Jets and Dolphins can't keep up and start winning more games, Buffalo could clinch the division early on this year, Justin. And how big of a deal is it for Buffalo? They're facing a Colts team here where they've struggled against the Colts before. The Colts have had their number in terms of close games and even upset in the past. How big is this game for the Bills against the Colts, do you think? And also, subsequently, the Eagles and Cowboys game as well that you selected. How big are these 2 games for the away teams? Jesus Lord. The away teams in Buffalo and Philly.
So it's huge for Buffalo because they'll have a 4-game lead at worst with 7 left to play. And they also play both the Jets and the Dolphins, if I'm not mistaken, coming up. So it's a major thing. You know what I mean? If they win this week, they can almost certainly it would be one of the biggest collapses of all time if they did not win the division. And this is also a humongous game for Philly because it's divisional. Obviously you always want to beat the team in your division, but if you want to keep up with a team like the Commanders, you're going to have to stay within 1 game. And then you're also going to have to take care of business when you see them again in the next game, which I believe is at the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. I know that they have a couple of NFC East big matchup. Oh, no, it's literally the following week they play the Commanders for the first time. So, yeah, I mean, you need to stay within at least 1 game of a hot team like that. There's a really good, I picked the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a really good chance that the Commanders come out and they win this game. I mean, the Pittsburgh was my upset pick, and it wasn't my favorite upset pick this week. So,
nor this year, to be fair.
It wouldn't have been an upset pick at the beginning of the year if you really thought about it. But
yeah, true.
Now it is, and it is I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think maybe Pittsburgh only gets like a break with a long ball.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it could be the difference in the game. But these 2 divisional games, they're against teams that are not playing well. I'm sorry, these two top picks that I have, one is a divisional game, are against teams that are not playing well, and they are extremely pivotal games in the NFL schedule. I mean, if the Bills somehow drop this to the Colts and the Jets win, and then they also still play each other, the Jets would then be one game out with those two wins.
Right.
So, and those two Buffalo losses. That's
Yeah.
a major difference between a minimum of 4-game lead with 7 left to go.
Yeah, we're slowly going to be on the road here soon enough where some of these divisions could get locked up relatively early. And the next 2 weeks of competition are going to play a big role in seeing who is going to be clinching this division, their respective divisions at the start of December, or if any of these divisions could go towards the end of the season. Because as we know, division hunts and wild card races are a big factor in the last 2 weeks of the season in terms of flexing. And of course, the very last week of the season where every single thing is up for grabs. We know this. We always have fun with it at the end, of course. I'll talk about my top 2 games I picked real quick. Minnesota and San Fran. Minnesota's just facing a really bad Jacksonville team. This could be considered a trap game, but if you're Minnesota and you want to continue to keep pace with Detroit and maybe want to threaten their division odds, and Detroit does have a win against you, you need to keep up with the good performances. You need to beat Jacksonville here. And for San Fran, look, you just had your bye week. You just had some time to rest. Tampa Bay is the walking wounded right now. Tampa Bay, yes, they are trying to keep pace, but if you're San Fran, you got to get this win here. Right. And you got to hope that the Jets can do the job against Arizona. The Seahawks have been disappointing this year, relatively speaking. It's just two big games. It's really for all of us. I think I could say this for our top 2 selections that we made, but it's like teams that are competing for, good standing to keep it, because a game, I think we've said this in the past, Justin, you're not going to lose your wild card spot or your division chances in just one game. But that one game can snowball into things going really, really right or really, really wrong for you. So, last game, I mean, if you want to say any more, Justin, but this is the last game I want to point out, just mainly because it's fun, because it was Rick's one-pointer.
Mm-hmm.
He picked the Giants in the Giants-Panthers game. Now, Justin, if by some miracle of God, and first off, this is Germany's last reparations for the 2 world wars in the last century, just for context as to why it's happening, clearly. If the Giants lose this game, Justin, aside from Rick being upset that he doesn't get one extra point, is Brian Daboll going to be fired? Just kind of because you've missed the coaching hot seat in the past. Is Daboll's job extremely up for grabs if the Panthers can pull off this upset, or does this game just have maybe not no, but look, the Giants season is rough. Yes, it would be disappointing, but you just need to take the lumps of what this 2024 season has clearly become.
It would be tough. I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of positives on this team, which is hard to say about a 2-7 team. They could have very easily, I think, been maybe 5 and they could have had at least 2 more wins on this schedule. They could have easily won that Commanders game. They could have easily won that Cowboys game. And those 2 divisional wins are a major thing. And then they also, again, just barely lost to the Commanders last time as well. So I think that there's a lot of positives, and I think that it would be a snap judgment to fire him. But that being said, a 6-game losing streak, or 5-game losing streak right now? It's a 4-game losing streak. And then capping it off with a 5th loss to the Carolina Panthers after trading their young receiver. I mean, come on. It would also be hard to defend his candidacy currently. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's the perfect game to finish this off on, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, one and all, for joining us on this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Yes, of course, no Podfather. We don't have a video in Rant Podium this week, but don't worry, when the Podfather returns, there'll be a rantin' and a must. But thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of the show. Very nice, simple trade deadline discussion. Moves made by teams, short-term effects, long-term effects, talk about the Cowboys' future, talking about our pick challenge, the picks we made, and more. It should be a very interesting week. Again, awards for us so far. I think coming up in the next week, probably next show, we're going to end up doing them. And it's always fun when the 3 of us sit down and pick our award winners, because it gets discourse going on the awards. Some very interesting award races, and I can't wait to discuss that and more. in future weeks. Justin, one last word for the people from you before we sign us off.
Bye.
Perfection. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And for more fun, football, and chaos, please tune in to the YouTube channel in the weeks and months to come. The playoffs, they're slowly creeping up. And join us for the ride. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time.